And now, a PIX11 special presentation. Tonight,
oh my God!
An event 75 years in the making.
Engage!
PIX11 has always been a place to make and break news.
That ball is out of here!
A place for every big swing and record home run.
A monstrous home run from Pete Alonso!
A place to share a laugh. Grab the popcorn for a night in at the movies, and where holiday traditions burn bright. So sit back and celebrate along with us as we look back at our first 75 years of being New York's very own.
Good evening and welcome to PIX11's 75th anniversary celebration. I'm Cuddy Tom from PIX11 News. Wow, 75 years of bringing groundbreaking television into your homes. So get ready to spend the next hour taking a stroll down memory lane with some of our PIX11 family. And I guess it's best to start at the beginning, right? Here's my good friend Craig Treadway with how and where it all began.
This is WPIX New York, Channel 11 on your dial.
Channel 11 made television history with its debut in 1948. But the station's home has an even older history of its own, just as legendary. The Daily News building was built between 1929 and 1930 and was headquarters for the New York Daily News newspaper until 1995. For its whole existence, the building has been recognized as one of New York City's major examples of Art Deco design. Architects of the building, Raymond Hood and John Mead Howells, were also the visionaries behind another iconic New York landmark, Rockefeller Center. On the building's west side, a plaque holds the principles of which the News was founded. In 1989, the building was declared a national landmark. A popular stop for tourists is the building's circular rotunda in the lobby on 42nd Street. The centerpiece of the lobby is this 12-foot globe designed by Daniel Putnam Brindley. Now, it weighs 4,000 pounds, and it once revolved in a circular rotunda, a black rotunda, every 10 minutes, which is roughly 144 times faster than the Earth rotates. The floors of the lobby hold a giant compass with the names of major cities and their distances from New York carved in the terrazzo. There are also glass exhibits designed for educational purposes by James H. Scarr. The building holds special meaning for comic book and movie fans. It's the model for the headquarters of the fictional newspaper and Clark Kent's day job at the Daily Planet in the 1978 movie Superman.
Oh, hi, Clark.
Hi, Lois.
How'd you like your first day on the job, huh?
Oh, well, frankly, the hours were sort of longer than I expected, but...
Photos from the filming of Superman adorn the lobby. Today, the building not only serves as the home of the PIX11 News, it's also the New York City hub of Nexstar Media's News Nation network. Today, although the Daily News building has many tenants, it still shines bright as one of the cornerstones of journalistic excellence in New York City.
In 1948, fewer than 4 million homes across the country had televisions, and New York City only had about 50,000 sets. That's it. But on June 15th of that year, spotlights swept across the Daily News building, cameras turned on, launching into a record 5-hour and 41-minute star-studded program. The cast of entertainers was impressive. They joined public officials and industry leaders, all saluting PIX11's first day on the air.
And wasn't life just a little bit simpler back then?
Hey everybody, let's have some fun.
From the beginning, PIX11 established itself with news and sports coverage, outstanding local special event telecasts, and syndicated programming and classic comedies. Many TV hosts and stars got their start here. Yes, including a young Ed Sullivan. And long before his show-stopping stage performance as Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof, comic actor Zero Mostel made his debut in a program called Zero on PIX.
Zero?
The boss.
Did you receive my Christmas present?
Yes, boss.
More original programming hit the airwaves in the 50s and 60s, like The Toon Detective, where Sigmund Spates composed songs based on phone numbers.
96764. All right, I'll try it in a sort of a classic style.
And from 1959 to 1966, Chuck McCann's Let's Have Fun show featured puppet characters who took on a life of their own. When there was a newspaper strike, McCann acted out comic strips such as Dick Tracy and Dondi. Children's programming has always been a big part of WPIX. There was Bozo the Clown in the late 50s.
WPIX, happy birthday to you.
And Lovable Lamb Chop on the Sherry Lewis Show. Beachcomber Bill Beery brought animals to the studio. And Hank Stoll talked with an animated chicken on his surprise show. PIX11 was considered New York's first educational TV station.
It teaches a lesson about trying to please everybody.
In 1955, PIX aired the Our Gang Little Rascals films, and the station's weatherman Joe Bolton hosted the clubhouse as Officer Joe. Jack McCarthy and Joe Bolton would host a variety of kids' favorites for a decade, including The Popeye Show and The Three Stooges. And of course, there was The Adventures of Superman, a classic broadcast from the building that would eventually be featured as the Daily Planet headquarters in Superman the movie. Also a big favorite, The Magic Garden with Carol Demas and Paula Janis, a huge hit.
Hello, Ole. Hello, Ole.
And of course, we can't forget PIX11, the 1980s video game show. From the mid to late 60s, the Clay Cole Show shook things up with a variety of musical acts, from heartthrob Bobby Rydell to a young Stevie Wonder. There was plenty of music to be found on WPIX, including the groundbreaking show Soul Alive.
I'm Jerry Bledsoe.
A show close to the heart of New York City Mayor Eric Adams.
But used to have a television show, I think it was called Soul Alive. And I was on the show dancing.
Bravo, yes.
And in 1964, a little band called the Rolling Stones appeared on PIX.
And the big shockwave of the Rolling Stones.
And along with all that great programming for kids and adults, some classic sitcoms along with news coverage took center stage in the early days of WPIX. Here's Tamsin Padal with that part of the story.
PIX11 launched the city's first all-film newscast, the Telepix Newsreel, in 1948. It was groundbreaking.
And now, Telepix is on the air.
The station's newscasts had many names over the years.
The WB11 team's got you covered.
Independent Network News, INN, began in June 1980 and had a station list of nearly 150 markets across the country, an innovative and pioneering concept at the time.
This is the award-winning Action News.
WPIX became a superstation in the 60s when cable systems started carrying its programs throughout the Northeast. WPIX joined the WB in 1995.
Oh, baby, watch the WB.
Airing a variety of syndicated programming, like New York's classic comedies, Seinfeld,
No soup for you.
Then Friends. The Honeymooners is one of the most beloved sitcoms in TV history. But its original run from 1955 to 1956 only lasted 39 episodes. And
You are a blabbermouth.
Art Carney starred along with Jackie Gleason. Reeve Carney remembers the actor, comedian, and his great-uncle.
I always say about my great-uncle that he played empty-headedness with such fullness of thought.
In 1958, WPIX picked up the reruns of the classic 39. They've been a part of our family ever since. Now we are broadcast partners with the CW Television Network, which includes successful original programs like Riverdale, Walker, and Superman and Lois.
Cool costume.
Thanks. My mom made it for me.
WPIX has remained true to its history as a trendsetter and innovator in broadcasting, starting with groundbreaking coverage of the political conventions in 1948 and 1952.
The Democratic Convention is just about to get underway.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
The office of President
of the United States.
In July 1956, the luxury liner Andrea Doria collided with the Stockholm, coming into New York Harbor. Viewers witnessed the last moments before the ship went under. 46 people lost their lives that day, but more than 1,600 were rescued. Ironically, 30 years later, the safe from the wreckage was opened on live TV on Channel 11. Long before Watergate, people were glued to their TV as mobsters were questioned live.
I'm not going to answer another question. You just says I'm not under arrest and I'm going to walk out.
WPIX also got into producing documentaries. The Scared Straight movement began with a documentary on Rahway Prison called I Am My Brother's Keeper.
Each man up here is doing an excess of 25 years.
PIX11 has also been there for the biggest stories, bringing the world to New York. In March 1964, a young Queenswoman, Kitty Genovese, was murdered in a brutal attack when dozens of people listened to her screams from outside their apartments, but did nothing for 35 minutes.
He's going to be charged with 4 counts. 1, murder in the 2nd degree.
It was a story that stunned the world. He was known as the Son of Sam, serial killer David Berkowitz, who terrorized New Yorkers for more than a year until his arrest in August 1977. The city that never sleeps came to a screeching halt July 13, 1977, after a lightning storm caused a blackout across all 5 boroughs, the darkness triggering a night of looting. More than 3,700 arrests were made, the largest mass arrest in the city's history, and estimated damages exceeded $300 million. In the late 70s, disco burst onto the scene, and a little film called Saturday Night Fever, centered around a dance club in Brooklyn, turned a little-known actor, John Travolta, into a megastar. The revolutionary nightclub Studio 54 opened its infamous doors in April of 1977. 2 years later, it was raided and its owners jailed on drug charges. It remained open until the mid-'80s. Also capturing the city's attention, the trial of Hedda Nussbaum and Joel Steinberg. It put the plight of battered women in the spotlight.
It was at that point I decided I was going to kill them all, murder them all, do anything.
He became known as a subway vigilante. Bernard Goetz opened fire on 4 young black men on a Manhattan subway that caused fear and panic in the streets. In 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 en route to New York from London exploded when a bomb went off over Lockerbie, Scotland. In the 90s, we witnessed the Crown Heights riots and the first World Trade Center bombing. Another gunman, Colin Ferguson, boarded a train in December 1993. This time on the Long Island Railroad, killing 6 passengers and wounding 19 others. John F. K. Jr., along with his wife and her sister, went missing, heading from New York to Hyannisport. The wreckage was found with no survivors. With the new millennium came a day and a year that will change our lives forever.
When our 75th anniversary special continues, some of the biggest stories that captured the attention of New Yorkers and some of PIX11's most seasoned reporters.
Hi, it's Lynn Miranda. Happy 75th anniversary, WPIX.
Hi, I'm Governor Kathy Hochul. Wanted to wish PIX11 a happy 75th anniversary.
New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy here to wish a very happy 75th anniversary to PIX11.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm here now with part of my PIX11 family. Our intrepid investigative reporter, Mary Murphy, our senior correspondent, Marvin Scott, who's probably seen more changes here than all the rest of us, and of course, New York's very own weatherman, Mr. G. We've been friends and colleagues for such a long time. Isn't it fun to be able to have a moment to sit down? We don't get a chance to do this.
No, we're always on deadline. We're never sitting, yes, except typing.
You know, if we added up all the years that the 4 of us have worked here at PIX, it would be a lot. Much more than 75, that's for sure. You've been here the longest, right?
This is my 43rd year.
43 years. And you, Mary?
30 years.
30. And I think you came like a year or 2 after I did.
Yeah, Mary tells me it's 30 years.
We came the same year.
To tell you that. You don't, you can't keep track.
What else she told me? Okay.
He always listens to what I say.
For me, 30 31. So many stories, so many memories. Let's talk about that. Some of the biggest moments and the biggest stories that you've experienced that resonate with you, that stands out in your mind. Let's start with you, Mary.
Well, we talk about the war on terror, and we all think of 9/11, but really the war on terror started in the early 90s. So right when I got here in 1993, it was post-first World Trade Center bombing. So all through the 90s, plots were being thwarted. There was a subway plot in 1997, Sunset Park. Emergency services went in. The bombs were not detonated, and they arrested 2 people. And then in 2010, in Times Square, there was an SUV packed with fertilizer, and it did not go off, thankfully, but the man was on a plane that had put it there, and they got him before he got out of the country. And we went up to Bridgeport, Connecticut, and Faisal Shahzad was the suspect. He had gone to be trained in weapons, and he was stashing his fertilizer in the garage where he lived. And our cameraman, Kenton Young, was sitting on another garage showing the FBI agents taking out the evidence.
The one I think that was most emotional, most difficult for all of us was the terror attacks of 9/11.
Of course.
Heidi sat at the desk, the anchor desk. Mary, you and I sat there for hours. And I remember how emotional it was in those early hours, Heidi. You and I, we also were concerned about our own family.
So true. In fact, I recall very clearly that morning was my son had just started at a brand new high school. It was his second day only at Stuyvesant, which you know is very, very close, just blocks away from the World Trade Center. I was working with you, frantically though, trying to reach him, but no cell phone service at all. And I finally, after a couple of hours, thought to myself, I'm going to abandon my desk here and go look for him. I just was so frantic. And I think it was you, Mary, that came running into the studio then saying, your son just called the station. And he tells me he wants you to know that he's safe. He's okay.
This was our own backyard. These were our neighbors who were being murdered.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
I start to leave, and I see people jumping at the top of the World Trade Center. And then everything is collapsed.
And it was so emotional, interviewing family members looking for loved ones and holding out hope that they'd be home for dinner.
What about Gigi?
Probably Sandy.
I remember sitting in the Weather Center saying to myself, oh my God, I haven't seen anything this size, twice the size of Texas in terms of the diameter of the storm. How do you present the information to the public? Because subways are going to flood. Even new subways with their barriers would flood. The barrier islands would flood. And New York City will see something that they would never see again, perhaps, but certainly haven't seen before.
Do we have anything that's sort of like fun that we remember? A good fun?
Oh, I have a positive.
Oh, yeah, positive.
I mean, it was born out of sadness, but it turned into a positive.
Yes.
So about 10 years ago, I started doing the mysteries, and I really loved doing those. The unsolved cases, the missing people. And there was one case where about 20 women had gone missing from a house in Brooklyn. And a woman wrote to me and she said, I think I lived in that house when I was a little girl, and I haven't seen my mother. I don't know my real name. I don't know my birth date. Her name, she thought, was Millie. So we did the story, and it was pretty dramatic. And then a year later, I received an email from a woman in Pennsylvania, and she said, that's my daughter. And we had to vet her a little bit, but I went and picked up the woman in Pennsylvania. Her name was Lucy. We brought her to Brooklyn. She knew it was her daughter. She just knew. It was such an emotional, powerful reunion. I will never forget that. Come here. Come here. Come here, baby. She had the tattered birth certificate from 40 years before, and a DNA test was done, and it was her mom.
Nothing will stand out in my entire career. My proudest achievement were the 5 visits I had with our troops from New York in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yes, yes, yes.
Hey, Jim, I got for your dad. How you doing? I promised him I'd give you a hug. We went and we brought them a taste of New York. Brought them bagels, hot dogs, and cheesecake, and we were a hit on every base we went to. But better than that, we put them on camera live to talk to their families back here in New York.
I'd like to say hello to my mother, Shireen Francis.
This means so much. This means so much.
I love you and I really miss you. And I want you to come home.
And another big moment for you, Mary.
Well, as a Catholic girl from Queens, I have to say my most exciting time here was covering the election of Pope Francis in 2013 with Dan Manarino. And we were there when the white smoke came out of the Sistine Chapel.
The bells pealing behind us from St. Peter's Basilica announcing a Pope has been elected here.
And it was the first Pope from South America. It was just a wonderful moment, and we were the only local station live. All the other stations went to network, but Dan and I did commentary for an hour and a half.
He goes up, he accepts the papacy, and then it takes about an hour for him to get dressed and come out from that window on St. Peter's Basilica. But really, the crowds were amazing. When that smoke came out, you knew immediately that the crowd started erupting, and there were people lining the streets here, lots of excitement out.
In more recent years, what are some of the stories that really, really resonate with you?
Well, one story that I never saw coming was the murder of Lisandro Jr. Guzman Feliz in the Bronx. He was a 15-year-old kid. He was walking home one night, and he was chased by 4 cars loaded with people, and he was killed, and it was captured on camera. He was stabbed outside a bodega. This story went around the world. People wrote to me from Australia, from Amsterdam, from South Africa, and I covered the entire trial. It was a year of work.
Thank you so much for being here and to share your moments and your thoughts and your stories with us. Now it's time to go back to work. Go.
Coming up, stories that define the last decade.
To this great New York institution, PIX11, happy 75th and another 75 years. We need you, because whenever there's news, PIX11 is one of the very first to be there. Keep up the great work.
The past 10 years of local news brought great triumph and great tragedy. But we were resilient. We held firm. We powered through. Here's Shirley Chan with a look back at some of the biggest headline-grabbing stories of the last decade.
In the last decade, PIX11 has been on the scene, covering the stories that have made an impact. There have been moments of turmoil and of triumph, of political and societal sea change. A pivotal moment was the death of Eric Garner in Staten Island. 2014 was a year marked by outrage and a modern-day call for civil rights. Just weeks after Garner died, Michael Brown also died at the hands of a police officer, this time in Ferguson, Missouri, sparking widespread protests and riots.
They just broke out another window. That's what I thought. That was a plate glass window across the street that somebody decided to bust.
Moments before his chokehold death, Garner could be heard saying, "I can't breathe." 6 years later, George Floyd would utter those same words as a Minnesota officer restrains him with a knee to the neck. Floyd's death reignited a movement. PIX11 followed Black Lives Matter marchers through the streets of the city, demanding an end to police brutality and racism against the Black community. The last 10 years show terror attacks and mass shootings occurring more and more frequently on American soil. In 2013, 2 explosions went off at the finish line of the annual Boston Marathon.
And just then is when the first explosion happened, killing that 8-year-old.
And injuring hundreds of others. The Tsarnaev brothers told authorities they learned to build bombs from an online magazine published by Al-Qaeda. In 2017, Las Vegas became the scene of America's deadliest mass shooting to date. 60 people killed when the gunman opened fire from his hotel room overlooking a music festival. New York City was not immune. In 2016, twin tragedies. In September of that year, the pressure cooker bomb attack in Chelsea. And in December, a pipe bomb detonated in an underground passageway in the Port Authority. While there were injuries, it is a miracle no one was killed in either attack. And the end of 2019 brought an anti-Semitic attack on Jersey City's Jewish community. 3 people died during a shooting rampage at a Jewish market. When big international news happens, PIX11 goes on the road. Most recently in London last September.
People around the United Kingdom and the world are mourning the loss of Queen Elizabeth II.
When Europe's longest reigning monarch, Queen Elizabeth II, died at the age of 96, we captured the profound display of grief and sadness. 2015, 2 gunmen killed 12 people inside the Paris offices of French satirical newspaper Charlie Hebdo.
Good evening to you from Paris.
Our crew was there as terror ripped through one of the world's most cosmopolitan cities. There's been a sweeping change in political tides in the last few years, perhaps none bigger than one of the biggest stories of the decade.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
Something once considered improbable took the political world by storm. Donald J. Trump is elected president in 2016, and PIX was there providing coverage as the president was impeached for abuse of power and obstruction in 2019, and there again this spring for his arrest and arraignment on felony charges. Prosecutors accusing Mr. Trump of a scheme to buy and suppress negative stories about him in order to boost his chances of winning the 2016 election.
The public needs to know the status and the consequences.
Our viewers tuned in for Governor Andrew Cuomo's almost daily COVID press briefings. The man who seemingly became America's governor would soon have a stellar fall from grace. In February 2021, PIX11 had the first interview with State Assembly member Ron Kim.
Cuomo threatened to ruin my career
When he publicly accused Cuomo of threatening him. And then a barrage of sexual misconduct allegations from female staffers followed. As the number of investigations piled up, Cuomo was forced to resign, and by August, New York had its first woman governor. Thousands gathered along the Canyon of Heroes, celebrating the U.S. women's soccer team after they won the World Cup a fourth time in 2019. And once again, the city showered them with a ticker tape parade. Perhaps the story of the decade, COVID-19, as the world is forever changed. New York City becomes the epicenter. The city shuts down. Schools switch to remote learning. The virus ravaged nursing homes, and New York dealt with a daily rising death toll, chilling images of makeshift morgues.
Medical facilities were overburdened, and in the early days of COVID, Elmhurst was the hardest hit hospital, not just in New York City, but some would say in the entire country. PPE and respirators were in short supply, and we learned to appreciate our essential workers.
Protesters are cheering for the doctors through the window. Look at this.
2020 brought a global pandemic and a pandemic of racism. President Trump's use of racist rhetoric about the coronavirus sowed the seeds of fervent anti-Asian American sentiment. The discussion then turned to when it was safe to reopen businesses and debates over masking and vaccination. Our cameras captured the long lines at testing sites. Then those same long lines appeared at mass vaccination sites, and New Yorkers tried to live with the new normal. PIX11 has been your eyes and ears for it all and will continue to do so for decades to come.
We can't talk about New York without talking New York sports. Coming up, our very own sports team with the best seats in the house and their favorite moments.
WPIX, Aaron Bruin here with the New York Yankees, and I wanted to wish you guys all the best and congratulate you guys on 75 years.
Welcome back to this PIX11 News Special, celebrating 75 years of New York's very own.
We are here in Flushing, Queens. Citi Field has been home to the Mets since 2009. PIX11 has been the broadcast home for the Mets since 1999. Let's be honest, New York is a baseball town, and it always will be. In July of 1948, PIX11 aired a game between the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers. The New York Giants made PIX11 their broadcast home in 1949, 8 years before heading west in 1957. In 1951, the Channel 11 team teamed up with the Yankees. It was the last year Joe DiMaggio wore pinstripes. And the same year, PIX signed a record-breaking contract with the Bronx Bombers to televise over 140 of their games, both at home and on the road. They broadcasted over 400 hours of programming, which at the time was the largest in television history. For the next 47 years, PIX11 was the broadcast home of the New York Yankees. PIX11 was the first New York television station to air an interleague game. It featured the Mets taking on the Yankees in high definition on its digital channel. In 1957, WPIX premiered the famous three-man booth, featuring Phil Rizzuto, Mel Allen, and the legendary Red Barber on their Yankee games.
Here's the windup. Fastball hit deep to right. This could be it. Way back there. Holy cow! 61 to Mary.
Phil Rizzuto would go on to work in the Channel 11 booth for 40 consecutive years. Through the years, the station has aired nearly every major sports franchise in the New York area.
To the left, waiting is Jones. The Mets are the world champions.
Sports has always played an important role in this city, and it will continue to do so. There's no fan comparable to the New York sports fan. Smart, passionate. You've been here with us at PIX11 for decades, and we will continue to be there for you. As we look back, we were there at PIX11 in 1961 as the M&M boys, Mantle and Maris, raced to break Babe Ruth's home run record in Major League Baseball. What a historic season. And we were there when the Mix said goodbye to baseball.
But now I think I know how Lou Gehrig felt.
We grieved with the fans over the tragic death of the iconic Thurman Munson in 1979. We shared the powerful day when baseball returned to New York City after 9/11, and the Mets catcher Mike Piazza hit the emotional home run at Shea against the Braves to help start the healing process in our city.
Lopez wants it away.
And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza, and the Mets lead 3-2.
There have been so many great sports moments on PIX over the years, and our team at PIX11 has covered them all. Our current sports team remembers their favorites. Well, no doubt PIX11 has played an important role in this city for the New York sports fan, now being joined by our team. And guys, let's run around the horn here a little bit. PIX11 sports, greatest PIX11, Joe, start with you, greatest PIX11 sports memory.
Yeah, well, you know, it's been 11 years that I've been working here now, and it was actually this last year that I learned about kind of the history and tradition that PIX11 has, as Aaron Judge was going to tie the American League home run record with his 61st home run.
The 3-2. Joe deep to left field. This could be it. See ya!
I found out that Roger Maris, when he hit his 61st home run, that happened on PIX11, which was fantastic. So then to know that happened here and then to see Judge pass it this year, it's like that legacy and tradition still carries on today. And then there are a couple other moments that were on PIX11. Chris Chambliss winning the pennant for the Yankees. That home run was on our air. There was obviously the famous George Brett moment, which if you're a baseball fan, you've seen that shot time and time again. The pine tar incident, they measure it on the plate, and then George Brett comes running out of the dugout, furious. And to know that it's our photographers, people who are still working at our station that I get to work with on a regular basis, that are capturing those historic sports moments, those iconic sports moments, that's awesome. And hopefully we can bring you a few more of those in the future.
How about you, Justin?
You know, it's such a rich history, and to be able to carry on this tradition is such an honor. But when I think about my very favorite sports moments, specifically in New York, I go back to 08, thinking about the Super Bowl, Patriots going for perfection, David Tyree's helmet catch, Eli Manning escaping pressure. But right before that, Manning nearly threw an interception. It was dropped. Those are the moments that you think about. Asante Samuel dropped the interception, but no one will ever remember that. They remember Tyree having possibly the greatest moment ever in Super Bowl history, and people still stop Tyree. He was speaking about it on our show as like chariots of fire.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Perry?
Honestly, I'm going to show my age here with a little recency bias, but I just love the amount of sports that we get to show on our air and are continuing to grow on our air. When I moved to New York, I knew any day I turned on PIX11, I could find some New York sport to let me know what was going on. We've got the Mets, which we love here at Citi Field. We're showing golf now. We've got some Liberty games coming up, other basketball, other baseball, just tremendous. It really feels like a home for New York sports, and it made me feel at home being able to find them all in one place.
I figure you're the only professional athlete on this panel. So yes, exactly right. Well, yeah, he is, absolutely. You pitched in this town. How about yourself?
Yeah, you know, growing up as a kid here, always being PIX11 was always a part of my life. And PIX11 sports, of course, having a chance for people to watch me play on television, it was a little weird, it's a little different, right? But I remember my greatest moment for myself was Shea Stadium, my very first start as a Met. I had already been in the big leagues for 6 years, so you'd think the nerves were going to be there, the butterflies, but there was tenfold. My family in attendance, about 120 tickets laid out, and I remember going out and warming up, and it was surreal. As I took it all in, I'm looking up in the upper deck at the seats I used to sit in as a kid, and then realized that I'm having an opportunity to be the guy that everybody's watching. And for a very, very brief moment, I had 2 strikes on the batter, got the clap, the slow clap where everybody's expecting a strikeout. I had to step off, reset myself and be like, all right, I got to get this done. It didn't happen the first time, but the second time I got the strikeout, and for about 30 seconds I knew what it was like to be Dwight Gooden. And that was everything to me. So when it comes to growing up in New York and New York sports, I'm so proud now to be a part of this family and this team, because I get a chance now to tell the stories and live the stories with the rest of the fans.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rich history. You think about like Bill White, Phil Rizzuto calling game. There was no better. Like, you think about great chemistry, and we certainly see it with Ron Keith and Gary in the Mets booth. But those guys on the, calling Yankee games game in and game out, it just added to your Yankee fandom growing up. When you think about what this city is all about, they celebrate champions. And 1994, I was there at Madison Square Garden when the Rangers won a Stanley Cup. I was there with my dad, my uncle Pete, my cousin Peter John, and we had gone to a number of Ranger games, seen a lot of disappointments, but finally seeing grown men and women cry in tears of joy that night at Madison Square Garden in '94 really kind of emphasized me as an 18-year-old at that stage of really what sports means in this town. And then I never felt old Yankee Stadium like it did in '96 when the Yankees beat the Atlanta Braves in 6 games. Being in right field with my older sister Kim, my dad had gotten tickets. He had actually slept outside with my uncle Pete in order to get tickets to the game. And but being there that night with my older sister Kim, seeing the reverberations and upper deck of Yankee Stadium rocking, and the Yankees finally winning a World Series after that drought. This city, it's all about passion when it comes to their sports teams, and those are a couple of moments to me that come back and really are what I think about most when I think about New York.
Yeah, and then you see it in the ticker tape parades, right? You see it on sports talk radio around here where people stop you in the street and they want to talk about, when are the Mets going to turn it around? What's going on with Scherzer and Verlander? And I mean, that's it. The reason you cry, you have those tears, you're moved to the emotions because you suffer with your teams through those bad times. Right now, obviously, all 5 teams playing were in the playoffs for us this year, and so that makes it a little bit more exciting. But still, then you get that fever, you feel it sweep through the city, and then the heartbreak and the disappointment if you don't go and win that championship, because like you said, it's Title Town, it's the Canyon of Heroes.
One of the first things they tell us when starting out in this business, no day is the same, but that is the beauty of being in New York, that we have 2 of everything, and in hockey, we have 3 of something. We may not have the best shooting percentage when it comes to championships. Shout out to NYCFC, they did get us a title, but in the 4 major sports, we're hoping that drought will finally end. But this is the beauty. Look at this team. Joe, you've been here the longest, but to know that we're constantly growing and we're here, we're always going to be at the top sporting events, giving you that wall-to-wall coverage.
Well, and Justin, what I love is it doesn't just stop with those 4 major sports and those 9 teams. There are always so many stories. One of my favorite things I got to cover this year, who'd have thought Fairleigh Dickinson was going to upset Purdue? Right. I mean, I was at a selection party where they're sitting there kind of shaking their head when they saw not only did they have to go to the play-in, but then we're going to have to face Purdue. And that game was not even close. Then you've got people all over the country shouting out at different games. I was covering the Iona game, and they had the Fairleigh Dickinson game on the Jumbotron, and people were cheering for FDU. To watch that in these small schools 20 minutes away from where I live be on a national stage, that starts here. New York has so much at all times, and you never know who's going to be winning. So a championship drought in the 4 major sports, sure, yeah, it's not great, and I really hope we're getting close to reversing some of those.
I think the media in this city gets a little bit of from those that are outside New York that were tough, that were
Yeah,
well, that's exactly right. Which I do think Figgy's a little bit unfair, because I do think I think in this city, I think the media and I think the fans hold the players accountable. If you're great, you're going to be celebrated, being treated like a conquering hero. If you don't perform, then it's going to go the other way.
You use the word that I use most, accountability. And that's what real good sports reporting is, right? We hold people accountable for their actions. We want to know the whys.
Quickly here, guys, Figgy, I'll take you out because you just joined the team, right? But covering events, Justin, start with you. Quickly, best event you've covered here at WPIX.
Honestly, it has to be the Knicks playoff run, this recent one. Okay. To see it go from roughly 14,000 during the pandemic to 19,000 plus, you can feel the energy. Yeah. There's nothing like MSG during the playoffs.
No, Knicks are the city's team. Joe?
I'm going to give you 2. The Mets, obviously, their World Series run going to Kansas City, even though it didn't end the way that everybody wanted. It's all about expectations, I feel like, and some of the best runs are when your team isn't expected to win the championship and they overperform. And I think the Mets kind of made one of those runs that year. I remember Yoenis Cespedes, Daniel Murphy, right? They were playing out of their minds that year. And so that was awesome to see them beat the Cubs here at Citi Field. And then the other one, the Giants playoff run, getting a win last year in the playoffs.
Minnesota.
We haven't seen that in forever.
It was
not
unexpected.
In my lifetime. The skull clap over there, them trying to intimidate it, but they were unflappable over there. So seeing a New York team succeed at that level is just always awesome.
Perry?
I do have to say the Knicks has been unreal this season. Shutting down 7th Avenue, I was in the middle of that, and the watch parties have been electric, even with some of the losses. But my favorite story, honestly, it's the underdog story of the Columbia women's basketball team. This is a Ivy League program that had never won a title in the history of the school. Ivy Leagues have been around for a really long time, guys.
Longer than PIX.
Yeah, longer than PIX, longer than 75 years, believe it or not. And to be out there and follow them, you know, the story when they were, hey, we might be able to do this, all the way to they ended up falling in the WNIT championship game, but they had never made it that far. No Ivy had ever made it that far, and they get to hang a banner for an Ivy League championship in their gym for the first time in the history of a very, very storied school and program.
Yeah, it's just to me it was last year's Rangers run to the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, I'm a hockey guy. I talk about it in the office all the time. You know, I love Stanley Cup playoff hockey, and I wish they got to a Stanley Cup final, but it would be great to see them win a cup for the first time since '94. But last year, being there, being at Madison Square Garden, feeling the energy of a great Ranger run is just off the chart. I got to be honest with you guys, it's an honor and a privilege to be a part of this team with you guys, and it's an honor and privilege for us to be able to bring sports to you each and every night on WPIX. We've been here for 75 years. We're going to be here for a heck of a lot longer. Thanks for being with us and trusting us each and every night.
So many great memories. By the way, something you may not know, Channel 11 was a station that introduced instant replay. Fast forward 75 years, you pretty much can't watch any televised sporting event without seeing an instant replay. So basically what I'm saying is, whether it's a technical innovation, original content, news, or sports, it's all right here on PIX.
Next, a look at some favorite PIX traditions.
Hi, Misty Copeland here. Happy 75th PIX11.
Hi everybody, I'm Billy Porter, and I'd like to wish a happy 75th anniversary to PIX11.
Hi, it's Josh Groban. Happy 75th anniversary to PIX11. To another 75 more.
Hey everybody, it's us. We just want to say happy 75th anniversary, baby.
PIX11, we love you.
PIX11 has a number of traditions dating back decades, from movie night to the annual televised celebration of the Christmas spirit, the Yule log that still burns bright during the holidays.
One PIX tradition and fan favorite, movies. We were once known as New York's movie station. Schiller Theater showed classic horror films starting in 1966. And by the early 1980s, WPIX could boast some of the biggest titles in the feature library with some of the biggest stars.
Here's looking at you, kid.
Casablanca, Monday night at 8. Today on the Sunday movie, Peter Fonda and Jerry Reed star in Highballin'.
And speaking of theater and stars, Broadway is a big part of the fabric of New York's very own. You'll find PIX on the red carpet for opening nights.
I feel so grateful. I feel really blessed.
And behind the scenes of your favorite shows.
PIX11 news anchor Dan Manarino.
Our office really is a mess. Is there anything we can do about this?
Scourgify.
WPIX has always been synonymous with community. From our first airing of the St. Patrick's Day Parade in 1949 that continued for 4 decades until 1992. And to this day, we air Midnight Mass and Easter Mass from St. Patrick's Cathedral.
O God, who have made this most sacred night radiant with the splendor of the true light.
Live from St. Patrick's Cathedral in the heart of New York City, PIX11 presents the celebration of Easter Mass.
Of course, we have a few other holiday traditions. One that started in 1963 with the beloved Laurel and Hardy and the timeless favorite, March of the Wooden Soldiers. Of course, one of the most popular WPIX originals is this guy right here, the Yule log, which has been burning in people's homes every Christmas morning since 1966. It was created by then station manager Fred Thrower to give New Yorkers their very own fireplace on Christmas Day.
Coming up, the city of New York honors WPIX.
Happy 75th birthday, WPIX. Boy, I'm sure glad there's somebody older than me.
Today is truly a day for New Yorkers in the tri-state to celebrate. June 15th marks the day WPIX has been in your homes for 75 years. And this date also is marked with a proclamation from the City of New York declaring it PIX11 Day. Mayor Eric Adams made that presentation.
Really excited to be here. When you think about 75 years, 1948, an amazing institution started that's just a New York brand, PIX11. It was only 50,000 television sets in our city at the time, but at the inauguration of this great program, we saw 1 million people watch, and the 1 million people just continue to grow. On the ground, there is no other station that is as close to the action like the PIX11 crew. And they do something else. They don't just report the news of the day. They go into the crevices of our community and they find these unbelievable stories that are able to really understand what New York is about. You spell New York, WPIX. It is clear that the folks that are here come from different walks of life, but they all come together to report the action and activity of our city. So I want to thank them and give them this amazing proclamation for their outstanding role to keep New Yorkers informed. They have earned more than 265 Emmy Awards and other accolades for excellence in news and anchoring. We wake up every morning to the crew to know how we're going to start our day. The sun is shining on New York because PIX11 is here in New York City. Thank you very much. Congratulations. 75 years.
We'll be right back.
And what better way to wrap up than with some of our PIX11 family looking ahead to the next 75. Cheers, everyone! For all of us at PIX11, I'm Connie Chung. Good night.